I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, smoothing down my anniversary dress and practicing my smile. 6 years of marriage, and I still got butterflies thinking about surprising Travis with the romantic dinner I'd planned. The irony of what happened next still makes my stomach turn. My name is Blair, and this is the story of how my husband left me for my cousin on our anniversary, and how it became the best thing that ever happened to me. Blair? Travis's voice drifted up from downstairs. Can you come down for a minute? Something in his tone made me pause. 15 years together, and I knew every inflection of his voice. This wasn't his excited anniversary tone. This was his "we need to talk" voice. I descended the stairs slowly, my heels clicking against the hardwood. Travis stood in our living room, hands shoved deep in his pockets, and there, perched on our cream leather sofa like she belonged there, sat my cousin Layla. "What's going on?" I asked, though a cold feeling was already spreading through my chest. Travis cleared his throat. "Blair, we need to talk." "On our anniversary?" I meant it to sound light, but my voice cracked. "I'm in love with Layla," he blurted out. The room went silent. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock Travis's parents had given us as a wedding gift. Tick, tick, tick. "How long?" The question came out surprisingly steady. Layla spoke up, her voice small. 8 months. 8 months. While I was planning our anniversary dinner, while we were having Sunday dinners with my family, while Layla was helping me pick out Travis's birthday gift, they were sneaking around behind my back. "I'm moving out today," Travis continued. "I've already packed my things." That's when I noticed the suitcases by the door. He'd planned this, waited for this moment. "Blair, say something," Layla pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled back sharply. "Don't touch me." "We never meant to hurt you," Travis said, running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I once found endearing. "It just happened." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. "It just happened? For 8 months?" "I know this is a shock," Travis started. "A shock," I interrupted. "A shock is finding out you ate the last cookie. This is... I gestured between them, words failing me. "We want to do this right," Layla said, standing up. "That's why we're telling you now." "On our anniversary?" I turned to Travis. "Was that your idea or hers?" He had the decency to look ashamed. I thought, a clean break. "Clean?" I laughed again, and this time it sounded slightly hysterical. "There's nothing clean about this." I walked to the window, needing space, needing air. Outside, life went on normally. Mrs. Peterson walked her dog. Kids rode their bikes. The world hadn't stopped spinning just because mine had imploded. "I'll get my things," Travis mumbled, heading upstairs. Layla hovered uncertainly. "Blair, I hope someday you can forgive." "Stop." I turned to face her. "Just stop. You don't get to hope for anything from me anymore." She flinched but stayed put. "We're family." "We're family," I corrected. "Now you're just the woman who slept with my husband." Travis came back down, more bags in hand. The sight of him packing up his life so efficiently made something snap inside me. "You know what's funny?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "I spent weeks planning tonight. Made reservations at Bella's, bought a new dress, wrapped your gift." I gestured to the silver-wrapped package on the coffee table. "Go ahead, open it." "Blair, I don't think—" "Open it." With trembling fingers, he unwrapped the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal filled with photographs and memories from our 15 years together. On the last page, I'd written about my hopes for our future. "I was going to tell you tonight that I'm ready," I said softly. "Ready for the baby we've been talking about." The color drained from his face. Layla made a choked sound. "But I guess everything happens for a reason, right?" I walked to the door and held it open. "Goodbye, Travis." They left quietly, Travis pausing at the threshold. "I really am sorry." I met his eyes. "Not as sorry as you're going to be." The door clicked shut behind them, and I stood there, alone in the house we'd built together. The grandfather clock kept ticking. Outside, a kid laughed. And somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hey, Peyton. Remember that women's advocacy program we used to talk about? I think it's time. You're doing what? Peyton nearly spat out her coffee across the cafe table. 2 weeks had passed since my world imploded, and I was done wallowing. Starting the advocacy program, I repeated, sliding my laptop around to show her the rough business plan I'd drafted. Remember how we used to talk about this in college? Supporting women through career transitions, divorce, domestic violence? Peyton leaned forward, scanning the document. Of course I remember. But Blair, honey, are you sure this is the right time? You just found out about Travis and what better time, I interrupted. I've got nothing holding me back now. No husband telling me to play it safe with my career, no family obligations keeping me from taking risks. Speaking of family, Peyton hesitated. Have you talked to anyone besides Layla and Travis? I stirred my untouched latte. My sister Nadine's been checking in daily. Mom's alternating between wanting to kill Travis and trying to set me up with her dentist's son. Dad's, well, being dad. Quiet, supportive, probably plotting Travis's mysterious disappearance. And Annika? Has she reached out? Layla's sister sent me a text. Said she had no idea what was happening and she's disgusted with both of them. I pulled up the message on my phone. Actually, she might be a good resource for the program. She works in social services. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious. I opened another document. I've already found a potential space to rent. It's that old community center on Oak Street. They're practically giving it away because it needs renovation. Peyton's eyes widened. Blair, that's going to take serious money. I know. That's why I've set up a meeting with Eric Henry. The Eric Henry? The philanthropist? I nodded. He funds women's initiatives. I reached out through LinkedIn, and his assistant actually responded. Meeting's tomorrow. Holy shit. Peyton sat back. You're not messing around. No, I'm not. I closed my laptop. Travis and Layla thought they were writing the end of my story. They're not. They're just the catalyst for the beginning. My phone buzzed. Another text from Nadine. Heads up. Mom's on the warpath. Layla showed up at her book club. Oh God, I groaned, showing Peyton the message. Want to go watch the drama unfold? Actually, yes. I grabbed my coat. But first, help me pick out an outfit for tomorrow's meeting. If I'm going to convince Eric Henry to fund this program, I need to look the part. The next day, I sat in Eric Henry's sleek downtown office, trying not to fidget in my new blazer. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes that seemed to see right through my professional facade. So, Ms. Rogers, he began, tell me why this program matters to you. I took a deep breath. Because 2 weeks ago, my husband left me for my cousin on our anniversary. His eyebrows shot up. That's certainly direct. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, I continued. I'm telling you because in the aftermath, I realized something. Women need support systems. Not just emotional support, but practical help. Career guidance, legal advice, financial planning. A community that lifts them up instead of tearing them down. And you think you're the right person to create this support system? I know I am. I opened my portfolio. I've spent the past 2 weeks interviewing local women, gathering data on what they need most. I've identified potential partners, created a business plan, and found an affordable space. What I need is someone who believes in this vision as much as I do. Eric leaned forward, studying my materials. This is impressive work for 2 weeks. Spite is an excellent motivator, I said before I could stop myself. He laughed, actually laughed, and the tension in the room broke. You know what? He closed the portfolio. I like you, Blair. You're not here playing the victim. You're channeling your pain into purpose. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Sarah, can you bring in the standard grant paperwork? My heart stopped. Does this mean... It means I'm willing to take a chance on you. Initial funding for 1 year with quarterly reviews. He smiled. Don't make me regret this. I won't, I promised, my hands shaking as I accepted the paperwork from his assistant. Later that night, as I sat on my sister's couch sharing the news, my phone lit up with a text from Travis. Can we talk? I showed Nadine the message. What are you going to say? She asked. I deleted the message without responding. Nothing. I've got better things to do than talk to him. I've got an advocacy program to build. Nadine raised her wine glass. To new beginnings? To new beginnings, I agreed, clinking glasses. And to karma being a patient friend. The electrical system needs a complete overhaul, the contractor said, shining his flashlight around the community center's dim interior. And don't get me started on the plumbing. I scribbled notes furiously. How long would the renovations take? 3 months minimum, but when it's done, he gestured around the space, you could fit at least 4 office spaces, a conference room, and still have room for group sessions in the main area. Perfect. I was already imagining it. Women gathering here, finding support, building each other up. Send me the quote by Friday? After he left, I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, spreading out my papers. The grant from Eric would cover renovations and initial staffing, but we'd need more for long-term sustainability. My phone buzzed. Dad. Hey, sweetheart, got time for lunch? 20 minutes later, I slid into our favorite diner booth. Dad was already there, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the menu he'd memorized years ago. You look tired, he said by way of greeting. Thanks, Dad. You really know how to make a girl feel special. He smiled, reaching across to squeeze my hand. You know what I mean? Are you sleeping? I'm fine, just busy with the program launch. I picked up my menu, though we both knew I'd order the same turkey club I always did. How's Mom? Still plotting Travis's demise, though now she's moved on to elaborate scenarios involving public humiliation rather than actual murder, so I'd call that progress. I couldn't help but laugh. And how are you handling it all? He set down his menu, looking at me seriously. I'm proud of you, kiddo. Instead of falling apart, you're building something meaningful. Dad. My throat tightened. Your mother wants revenge. I get that. But what you're doing, that's real power. The waitress arrived to take our orders, giving me time to compose myself. As she walked away, Dad cleared his throat. There is something you should know, though. I ran into Peyton at the grocery store yesterday. She mentioned something about Layla. My stomach clenched. What about her? Apparently things aren't as rosy as they seemed. Travis has been, well, being Travis. Meaning? Working late, missing dates, the same stuff he did with you toward the end. I stirred my water with my straw, watching the ice cubes swirl. Karma's not wasting any time, is she? Apparently not. Dad paused as our food arrived. How does that make you feel? Honestly, nothing. I took a bite of my sandwich. I'm too busy to care about their drama. My phone lit up with a text from Annika. Can we meet? Need to talk about the program. And other things. Speaking of drama, I showed Dad the message. Are you going to meet her? I think I have to. She's been supportive, and she could be valuable to the program with her social work background. Later that afternoon, I met Annika at a small coffee shop across town. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her cup sleeve. Thanks for meeting me, she started. I wanted to talk about potentially volunteering with the program, but also... She took a deep breath. Layla's miserable. Not my problem. I know, but she's realizing what a mistake she made. Travis is, well, being Travis. I couldn't help but laugh. You're the second person to say that today. He's already showing his true colors. Missing dates, always working late, flirting with his secretary. Again, not my problem. I pulled out my program materials. Now, about volunteering. Blair, wait. Annika touched my arm. I know you don't want to hear this, but Layla's talking about leaving him. I set down my papers. After destroying my marriage and turning our family upside down, she's what? Having second thoughts? She knows she messed up, badly, but maybe this could be an opportunity, for the program, I mean. Her story could help other women. You want me to use my cousin's affair and subsequent regret as a cautionary tale for the program? Annika nodded hesitantly. I sat back, considering. It was a compelling idea, from a purely strategic standpoint. But was I ready to face Layla, to hear her story? I'll think about it, I said finally. But first, let's talk about how you can help with the program launch. We're planning a community needs assessment next week. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the image of Layla, realizing too late that she'd traded one version of Travis for another. Part of me wanted to gloat, to revel in their misery, but a smaller, quieter part wondered if there might be something more powerful in turning their mistake into a force for good. I pulled into my driveway, decision made. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's growth. You invited who to the family dinner? Nadine's voice reached a pitch only dogs could hear. Layla, I repeated, sorting through paint samples for the community center. And before you freak out? Too late, Nadine paced my living room. Have you lost your mind? Mom will literally murder her with the good silverware. Mom knows she's coming. Dad's handling it. Oh, well, if Dad's handling it. Nadine collapsed onto my couch. Why are you doing this? I set down the paint samples. Because Annika's right. Layla's story could help other women. And I hesitated. Maybe it's time to stop letting this tear our family apart. That's very mature of you, Nadine said suspiciously. What's the real reason? You'll see at dinner. Sunday dinner arrived with its usual chaos. Mom stress-cooked enough food for an army, Dad played peacekeeper, and Nadine texted me updates from the kitchen. Mom stabbing potatoes like they personally betrayed her. I arrived early to help set up, finding Annika already there. Layla's nervous, she whispered as we set the table. Like, throwing up, nervous? Good, I said, then caught myself. Never mind. The doorbell rang. Mom's wooden spoon clattered against the pot. I'm not answering it. I will, I said, surprising everyone. Layla stood on the porch, looking smaller than I remembered. No designer dress today, just jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Hi, she said softly. Come in. I stepped aside. Everyone's in the kitchen. The silence that fell when Layla entered was deafening. Mom gripped her wooden spoon like a weapon. Dad cleared his throat. Well, he said too brightly, shall we eat? Dinner was excruciating. Forks scraped plates. Someone coughed. Mom aggressively passed rolls. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. So, Layla, how's Travis? She flinched. I wouldn't know. We broke up last week. Mom's roll stopped halfway to her mouth. Nadine choked on her wine. What happened? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I caught him with his secretary. Layla's laugh was hollow. Apparently, I should have seen it coming. Once a cheater. Oh, honey, Mom said, maternal instinct temporarily overriding anger. That must have been awful. I deserved it, Layla whispered. What goes around comes around, right? No one deserves that, I said, surprising myself. Which is why I asked you here tonight. All eyes turned to me. The Women's Advocacy Program is launching next month. We're focusing on helping women rebuild their lives after setbacks, divorce, career changes, bad relationships. I took a deep breath. I think your story could help others avoid the same mistakes. You want me to what? Stand up and tell everyone how I destroyed my cousin's marriage and got my karmic payback? I want you to help other women understand their worth, to recognize red flags, to know they deserve better than being someone's second choice. Tears spilled down Layla's cheeks. Why would you want to help me after what I did? Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and because sometimes the best way to heal is to help others heal too. Mom set down her spoon. Blair's right. What you did was terrible, but wallowing in it won't help anyone. Does this mean you'll stop plotting her death? Dad asked hopefully. We'll see, Mom sniffed, but I caught her small smile. Later, as everyone helped clean up, my phone buzzed with a text from Eric. Local news wants to do a story on the program launch. Interested? Everything okay? Nadine asked, loading the dishwasher. Better than okay. I showed her the text. The program's getting attention. Real attention. You know who's not going to like that? Nadine grinned. Travis. Travis doesn't get a vote anymore. Layla appeared in the doorway. I'll do it. I'll share my story at the launch. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid my mistakes. Thank you, I said. But Layla? This doesn't fix everything between us. I know. She twisted her hands together. But it's a start, right? From the living room, we heard Mom's voice rise. And another thing. Who does Travis think he is? Moving on to his secretary. That boy never did have the sense God gave a goose. Mom, Dad's patient voice responded, I thought we agreed to let it go. I'll let it go when I'm dead, Mark. Nadine, Layla, and I caught each other's eyes and burst out laughing. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And sometimes, that's enough. As everyone left that night, I couldn't help but smile. The program was gaining momentum, family wounds were slowly healing, and karma was doing her thing. Travis wouldn't know what hit him when the news story broke. And we're rolling in 3, 2, 1. The news reporter smiled professionally at the camera. I'm here with Blair Rogers, founder of the Rising Phoenix Women's Advocacy Program, which opens its doors next week. Blair, what inspired you to start this initiative? I sat straight in my chair, wearing the power suit Eric had insisted I buy for press appearances. Sometimes life hands you a moment where you can either break down or break through. This program was my breakthrough. Sources tell us your own experience with divorce influenced this project? Yes, I said carefully. But this isn't about one person's story. It's about creating a support system for women facing all kinds of transitions. The interview continued smoothly until the reporter dropped her bomb. And how do you respond to rumors that your ex-husband's new girlfriend, your cousin, will be speaking at the launch event? I kept my smile steady. Every story matters, even the uncomfortable ones, especially the uncomfortable ones. After the cameras stopped rolling, Eric appeared at my side. Perfectly handled. The nomination committee will love it. Nomination committee? For the Women in Leadership Award, I submitted your name last week. He straightened his tie. The ceremony's next month. Before I could respond, Peyton burst into the room. Blair, we have a situation. Travis is here. My stomach dropped. Here? Now? He's in the lobby. Says he needs to talk to you. Eric stepped forward. Want me to handle it? No, I said, standing. I've got this. Travis stood by the reception desk, looking exactly as I remembered, yet somehow different. Less intimidating. Smaller, somehow. Blair, he started, taking a step forward. This is a private building, Travis. You can't just show up here. I saw the news preview. He ran a hand through his hair. You're really going to let Layla tell everyone what happened? Afraid of bad publicity? My firm's partners won't like it. Your firm's partners? I laughed. That's what you're worried about? Blair, please. We can work something out. Maybe I could make a donation to your program in exchange for discretion? Let me get this straight, I said, my voice rising. You want to buy my silence? After everything? I'm trying to protect my career. Like you protected our marriage? The words shot out before I could stop them. You know what, Travis? This isn't about you. It's not even about me anymore. It's about helping women recognize their worth before they waste 15 years with someone like you. Is everything okay here? Eric appeared at my side, his presence solid and reassuring. Travis's eyes darted between us. Who's this? Eric Henry, major donor and board member, Eric said smoothly. And you are... leaving, I cut in. He was just leaving. Travis's jaw clenched. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I turned to Eric. Would you mind walking me back to my office? We should discuss that nomination. As we walked away, I heard Travis call out, You've changed. I looked back over my shoulder. Thank you. In my office, I collapsed into my chair. Well, that was fun. You handled it beautifully, Eric said, perching on my desk, though I might be biased. Biased? I find I'm becoming increasingly biased where you're concerned. He met my eyes. Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked you to dinner? My heart skipped. Yes. No. I took a breath. Dinner would be nice. Tomorrow? After the final renovation inspection? It's a date. The words slipped out before I could catch them. His smile widened. Yes, it is. After he left, Peyton appeared in my doorway. So, Eric Henry, huh? Don't start. I'm just saying he's successful, handsome, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. He's also on my board of directors. A minor detail. She dropped into a chair. So, what are you wearing tomorrow? Nothing, because it's not happening. I can't date my biggest donor. Why not? You're not that woman anymore, Blair. The one who plays it safe, who worries about what everyone else thinks. She was right. I wasn't that woman anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. Travis came by my place too. Tried to convince me not to speak at the launch. I told him to go to hell. I showed Peyton the message. Look at that, she grinned. Your cousin grew a backbone. Maybe we all did. So, about that dinner outfit? I laughed, pulling up my calendar. Help me pick something. But Peyton, let's keep this quiet for now. The last thing I need is Mom playing wedding planner again. Deal. But when you win that leadership award next month, you better let him be your date. I thought about Eric's kind eyes, about Travis's diminished presence, about how far I'd come from that woman in the anniversary dress. Maybe I will, I said. Maybe I will. The annual family reunion buzzed with tension. Aunt Martha's famous potato salad sat untouched as relatives clustered in whispered groups, stealing glances at me, then at Layla, then back again. We'd agreed to attend separately, her in the afternoon, me in the evening, but plans changed when the local news crew asked to cover the event. Ready for this? Nadine appeared at my elbow, clutching a glass of wine. Define ready. I smoothed down my dress for the 100th time. In 30 minutes, I'd be announcing the program's success to our entire extended family, and the evening news. Mom's already had 3 glasses of wine, Nadine reported. Dad's stress-eating cocktail weenies, and you'll never guess who just showed up. My stomach dropped. Travis? With his secretary-turned-girlfriend. Bold move, considering half the people here still want him dead. I scanned the crowd until I spotted him. Travis, looking uncomfortable in a polo shirt that was slightly too tight. A petite blonde hovering nervously beside him. What's he doing here? Uncle Rob invited him. Apparently, they're still golf buddies. Fantastic. I checked my phone. Another text from Eric. On my way. Traffic's terrible. Save me some of that famous potato salad? Despite everything, I smiled. Is that Eric? Nadine waggled her eyebrows. How was dinner last week? Perfect, I admitted. And then the next dinner was perfect too, and the one after that. Look at you, glowing like a teenager, she nudged me. Think Travis has noticed? I don't care if... I stopped as Layla approached, looking uncertain. Hey, she said softly. The news crew wants to do a pre-interview with both of us. Something about the power of forgiveness angle. Now? She nodded. They're setting up by the oak tree. That's where Travis proposed, Nadine muttered. Even better, I said grimly. Let's give them what they want. The reporter positioned us carefully, the ancient oak tree framing the shot. Through the viewfinder, I could see Travis watching, his new girlfriend forgotten at his side. So, ladies, the reporter began, tell us about this unique partnership. Layla spoke first, her voice steady. I made a terrible mistake. I hurt someone I loved, destroyed relationships, and learned the hard way that karma is real. And Blair, you've turned this personal tragedy into triumph? I turned pain into purpose, I corrected. The Rising Phoenix program isn't about my story. It's about every woman's story, including Layla's. Speaking of stories, the reporter smiled, I understand congratulations are in order. The Women in Leadership Award nomination is quite an honor. From the corner of my eye, I saw Travis straighten up. Yes, it is, I said. The ceremony's next month, and we're hoping... Blair! A familiar voice called out. Eric jogged up, slightly out of breath. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. The reporter's eyes lit up. And who's this? Eric Henry, he said smoothly, sliding an arm around my waist. Board member, donor, and very proud boyfriend. Travis's cocktail glass shattered on the patio. Cut! The reporter called out, delighted by the drama. Can we get that entrance again? Actually, I said, I think we have something better. Layla, ready to tell your story? She nodded, straightening her shoulders. Ready. For the next hour, we talked about the program, about healing, about turning mistakes into missions. The camera caught every moment, including Travis's hasty exit with his girlfriend, and the way Eric never left my side. That was amazing, Eric whispered as the crew packed up. You're amazing. Get a room, Nadine called out, passing by with more wine. Mom appeared, flushed with pride and probably wine. Blair, honey, the program sounds wonderful. And Eric, she turned to him, you're coming to Sunday dinner next week, no arguments. Yes, ma'am, he grinned. Did you see Travis's face? Layla asked quietly. When Eric showed up? I was too busy looking at Eric, I admitted. That's how I know you've really moved on. She squeezed my hand. Thank you. For everything. The sun was setting as the reunion wound down. Eric and I sat under the oak tree, sharing the last piece of Aunt Martha's potato salad. So, he said, about that award ceremony next month? Yes? I was thinking, maybe we could make it a double celebration? My heart stopped. What do you mean? He pulled out a small velvet box. I'm not proposing, not yet. But this is a promise ring. A promise that when you're ready, when it's right. Yes, I whispered, letting him slip the delicate ring onto my finger. When it's right. From across the yard, I heard Mom's delighted squeal. Nadine was probably already planning the wedding. And somewhere, Travis was realizing exactly what he'd lost. But sitting there, under the oak tree with Eric, none of that mattered. What mattered was that I'd found my strength, my purpose, and maybe even my happy ending. The Women in Leadership Award ceremony glittered with possibility. Hundreds of people filled the hotel ballroom, their excited chatter mixing with the soft, classical music playing overhead. Eric squeezed my hand under the table. Nervous? He whispered. Terrified, I admitted. What if I trip on stage? Then I'll trip too, make it look intentional. Peyton leaned across the table. Heads up, Travis just walked in. I refused to turn around. With the secretary? No, Nadine chimed in, not even trying to be subtle about her rubbernecking. He's alone, and he looks rough. Can we not? I adjusted my speech cards. This night isn't about him. You're right, Mom said, reaching over to straighten my necklace. It's about my brilliant daughter who turned heartbreak into hope for hundreds of women. Speaking of which, Eric nodded toward the stage. I think they're ready to start. The lights dimmed as the MC took the stage. I half listened to the opening remarks, my mind on the 50 women from our program sitting at sponsored tables throughout the room. Women who'd found their strength, just like I had. And now, the MC announced, to present the Women in Leadership Award, please welcome Layla Schmidt. My head snapped up. This wasn't part of the plan. Layla walked onto the stage, looking elegant in a simple black dress. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the microphone. A year ago, she began, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I betrayed someone I loved, someone who had always been there for me. I thought I was choosing happiness, but I was really choosing destruction. The room fell silent. But my cousin Blair? She chose something else. She chose to transform her pain into purpose. While I was learning hard lessons about karma and consequences, she was building something beautiful. I felt Eric's hand tighten around mine. The Rising Phoenix program has helped dozens of women rebuild their lives. Women leaving abusive relationships. Women starting over after divorce. Women like me, who had to hit rock bottom before they could rise. Tears pricked at my eyes. So it is my profound honor to present this year's Women in Leadership Award to my cousin, my inspiration, and yes, my friend, Blair Rogers. The room erupted in applause as I made my way to the stage. Layla hugged me tight, whispering, I hope this was okay. I took the podium, looking out over the crowd. I spotted Travis near the back, looking smaller than I remembered, but my eyes were drawn instead to Eric's proud smile, to my family's beaming faces, to the women whose lives we'd touched. Thank you, I began. A wise person once told me that sometimes life hands you a moment where you can either break down or break through. Standing here tonight, I see so many women who chose to break through. I shared stories of our program participants, The domestic violence survivor who now counsels others. The divorced mother who started her own business. The young woman who left a toxic relationship and found her voice. But this award isn't just about me, I continued. It's about every person who supported this dream. My family, who showed me that love is stronger than betrayal. Eric, who believed in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. I paused, finding Travis's eyes in the crowd. And yes, it's even about those who hurt us, because sometimes our greatest pain leads to our greatest purpose. The Rising Phoenix program isn't just about helping women survive. It's about helping them soar. The standing ovation that followed was deafening. As I returned to my seat, Eric pulled me close, kissing me softly. "Proud of you," he murmured. Later, during the reception, Travis approached our table. He looked uncertain, almost fragile. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "You've done something amazing here." "Thank you," I replied, surprised to feel nothing but calm. "How are you?" "Honestly, starting over? The secretary, that didn't work out." "I heard," I said. "There's a men's support group that meets at the center on Thursdays, if you're interested in real change." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I will." "And Blair? I really am sorry. For everything." "I know," I said. "But I'm not." As he walked away, Eric wrapped his arms around me. "Ready to go home?" "Almost." I turned to face him. "Remember that promise ring?" "Of course." "I'm ready, when you are." His face lit up. "Yeah?" "Yeah." From across the room, I heard Mom's excited squeal. Somehow she always knew, and Nadine's delighted laughter. Layla caught my eye and smiled, genuine happiness replacing the guilt that had haunted her for so long. The Rising Phoenix program had started as my revenge against betrayal, but somewhere along the way, it had become something more. It had become my redemption, my purpose, my future, and standing there in Eric's arms, surrounded by family and friends and the women we'd helped, I knew this was just the beginning. "If you cry, I'll cry, and then my makeup will run," Nadine warned, adjusting my veil in the church dressing room. "I'm not crying," I lied, blinking rapidly. "I'm just thinking about how far we've come." "Save the reflection for your vows," Mom bustled in, carrying my bouquet. "Though I still think you should have let me add more flowers to the centerpieces." "Mom, everything is perfect." I turned to the mirror, hardly recognizing myself in the elegant white dress. "Even the centerpieces." A soft knock at the door revealed Layla and Annika. "The program participants are all seated," Layla reported. "Front 3 rows, just like you wanted." "And Travis?" Nadine asked hesitantly. "In the back with his new girlfriend," Annika said. "The counselor from the men's support group? They actually met through the program." I smiled, remembering his nervous phone call asking if it would be okay to bring her. He'd been attending the support group regularly, working on himself, learning to be better. It felt right having him here, witnessing this new beginning. "5 minutes," Peyton called through the door. Dad appeared, looking dapper in his tuxedo. "Ready, kiddo?" "Almost." I turned to Layla. "Thank you for everything." She hugged me carefully, mindful of the dress. "Thank you for showing me how to be strong." The wedding march began, and everyone scrambled into position. As Dad and I waited behind the closed doors, he squeezed my hand. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best things." The doors opened, and Eric's face at the altar made everything else fade away. He looked at me like I was his miracle, his eyes shining with tears he didn't bother hiding. Our vows were personal, honest, real. Eric spoke about finding love when he least expected it, about watching me turn pain into purpose. I talked about learning to trust again, about building something beautiful from broken pieces. "The Rising Phoenix program taught me that every ending is just a beginning in disguise," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "Eric, you didn't just believe in my dream, you helped make it soar, and I promise to spend the rest of my life soaring with you." The reception was a beautiful chaos of family, friends, and program participants. Mom danced with everyone, Dad gave an emotional speech that had the whole room crying, and Nadine caught the bouquet, though I'm pretty sure she tackled someone for it. "May I have this dance?" Travis's voice surprised me during a slow song. I glanced at Eric, who nodded encouragingly. "You look happy," Travis said as we swayed awkwardly. "Really happy." "I am. The program, it changed my life too, you know. Made me face some hard truths about myself." "I know. Sarah told me you've been helping other men recognize their toxic behaviors." He smiled slightly. "Karma works in mysterious ways, doesn't it?" "It does." I spotted Sarah watching us, her expression gentle. "She's good for you." "She is. And Eric, he's everything I should have been." "No," I said firmly. "He's exactly who he is, and I'm exactly who I am. We can't change the past, Travis. We can only learn from it." The song ended, and Eric appeared at my side. "Mind if I steal my wife back?" Wife. The word sent tingles through me. Later, as Eric and I swayed to our last dance, I looked around the room. Mom and Dad, still so in love after 30 years. Nadine flirting with Eric's best man. Layla and Annika laughing with program participants. Travis and Sarah, heads bent close together, starting their own story of redemption. "What are you thinking?" Eric murmured in my ear. "I'm thinking about phoenixes," I said. "About how sometimes we have to burn everything down to build something better." "And did you? Build something better?" I thought about the hundreds of women we'd helped, the lives we'd changed, the strength we'd found together. I thought about the man holding me, who saw my broken pieces and called them beautiful. "We all did," I said. "Every single one of us." The music faded, but Eric kept holding me. "Ready for our next adventure?" I looked up at him, at the future shining in his eyes. "With you, always." As we left the reception, under a shower of rose petals, I caught one last glimpse of my family. All of them, even the ones who had hurt me, even the ones I had to forgive to find my happiness. They were all part of my story, my rising, my triumph. And as Eric and I drove away toward our honeymoon, toward our future, I knew that some endings aren't really endings at all. They're just the first page of a better story. A story of strength, of redemption, of rising from the ashes again and again until you finally learn to fly.
Hello, my name is Evelyn, and I recently turned 32. I am employed at an international investment company which focuses on foreign markets. My husband, Brian, works in the service sector. However, his job security is precarious as his contract renews annually. This lack of stability brings a sense of unease each year as renewal time approaches. Brian comes from a family that holds government positions in high esteem. Both his parents were government employees, and his sister currently holds a government job. Unfortunately, they view my role in the private sector with a certain disdain. Since marrying Brian, we have lived with his family, who have openly criticized my employment at a company that primarily aims to generate profit and compensate its staff. There's a prevailing notion among some that individuals in private companies are there because they failed to secure government jobs. This belief extends to the assumption that working for a foreign company is often a last resort, a fallback when local opportunities fall through. Brian, influenced by his family's beliefs, clings to his job despite its temporary nature because it affords him a certain level of societal standing and income. Once, during a particularly anxious moment about his job security, I asked Brian whether a permanent position in a regular company might be safer than his temporary government role, especially as the fiscal year wound down. He responded quickly, suggesting that if he couldn't be a civil servant, he'd rather not work at all. It appears he hasn't even disclosed to his parents that his role is not permanent, insisting that I keep this a secret. Additionally, Brian, perhaps in keeping with his British upbringing, often boasts about non-existent promotions, a facade I struggle to comprehend. This situation leaves us navigating a complex web of family expectations, job insecurity, and the challenges of living with values that deeply contrast with our reality. Brian maintains a facade for his family, striving to appear successful and stable in his career. He keeps the details of his finances rather private, rarely sharing his salary statements with me. Instead, only modest sums are transferred into our joint account. Curious about his earnings, I once inquired during a family gathering, "Brian is a section manager now. Surely his salary has seen a boost. How much does he earn now?" He responded tersely with just 6 words, "You can earn so much these days." While I know I earn well as a bond trader, largely through commissions and consistent profits, I wasn't sure how my income stacked up against a government section chief's salary. My role has me earning substantially, often more than many other corporate employees. When Brian hinted at the amount I make, my mother-in-law seemed impressed, but admitted she couldn't gauge it against the earnings from her era. "It seems Brian is doing well," she commented proudly. His sister, a city office employee, overheard our conversation and chimed in, hinting that if Brian were in her position, he might have been a division head by now. "Government jobs do pay well, don't they?" she remarked. Witnessing the reactions, Brian appeared increasingly uncomfortable, regretting he had brought up my salary at all. He quickly diverted the conversation. "Let's not talk about salaries anymore. By the way, did anyone meet with the housing company representative who visited recently? Are we considering renovations for this house?" Indeed, a sales rep from a housing company had visited, and sensing Brian's need to switch topics, I played along, discussing potential home improvements. "As for the kitchen remodeling, we were thinking," I began, only to be sharply interrupted by my mother-in-law, who exclaimed, "Stay out of family matters. You're just a daughter-in-law. Keep quiet and do as you're told." Her glare was piercing, almost fearful. It was clear she remained perpetually dissatisfied with anything I contributed to the conversation. The root of my mother-in-law's dissatisfaction seems to stem from the fact that I'm not employed by the government, a prestigious occupation in her eyes. Adding to her grievances is her perception of how I handle our finances. She believes that I control all of my husband Brian's earnings and dictate how much he can spend by giving him an allowance. In reality, though, Brian's salary primarily covers his personal expenses, and the majority of our household costs are funded by my income from working at a foreign investment firm. My sister-in-law, who lives with us as well, does not contribute financially to the household. She often makes remarks that hint at her belief that we are financially comfortable and don't need her help. "You're taking money from an elderly couple who only have their pension, and Brian earns a lot, so you're not struggling, right?" she says, not showing any willingness to assist with expenses. Living in my husband's family home does save us from the burden of rent, allowing us to get by on my salary alone, but it does create a palpably tense atmosphere. After dinner, as discussions about possibly working with a housing company arose, I found myself excluded and chose instead to busy myself by cleaning up the kitchen. Neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law lifted a finger to help with the chores. After cleaning, I quickly returned to the routine of cooking, cleaning, and laundry, tasks I undertake daily without respite. One of the benefits of my job at the foreign company is the absence of required overtime. As long as I complete my tasks efficiently during regular hours, I'm free to leave on time, which is immensely relieving. This arrangement allows me to maintain a clear boundary between my work and personal life, ensuring I don't have to carry job-related stress into our home, a significant advantage indeed. On his days off, Brian often stays busy with his computer at home. I sometimes worry about whether it's appropriate for him to bring work home and continue there. When I expressed my concern, he simply explained, "I can't work overtime, and if I don't finish on time." His response trailed off, leaving unresolved questions about balancing our work life and personal tensions in our already strained household. Lately, the atmosphere at home has become increasingly strained. My husband Brian has been irritable and quick to anger, particularly when I attempt to discuss any matters with him. Recently, when I brought up a topic about our housing, he snapped at me saying, "It's none of your business. Didn't Mom tell you that already? Just follow the rules. That's all you need to do." Despite my efforts in managing both the household chores and our finances, his approach of keeping me excluded from certain discussions leaves me feeling sidelined and undervalued. One day, a representative from a home building company visited my in-laws' residence. Everyone, except for me, gathered around a computer to discuss floor plans and view housing designs. Curious, I approached to see what was being planned over a cup of tea, but was sharply rebuked with a, "You don't need to see this, go away." I was taken aback to discover that instead of merely renovating, they were planning to build an entirely new house. My father-in-law had mentioned wanting more space since our current home was feeling cramped, and it seems they are moving forward with these plans. My in-laws, both retired from government jobs, have amassed a considerable sum from their pensions. Since I moved in, they have been living off this pension without contributing to daily living expenses, so they likely have a significant amount saved for this new construction. Choosing to distance myself from the ongoing housing discussions, I can't help but worry about future arrangements, especially concerning my sister-in-law who is 29 and might soon decide to marry. I wonder if she plans to reside in this new house as well, which could further complicate our already delicate family dynamics. Although there hasn't been an explicit discussion about it, I'm assuming my sister-in-law will be residing in the new house. My feelings toward her mirror those I hold for my mother-in-law. Neither is particularly helpful with household chores, and both are often found complaining. I find myself silently hoping she will marry soon and perhaps move out. However, during a conversation with the home builder, my father-in-law expressed a desire for the new house to accommodate multiple families. "Can we add another room? I want a house where my daughter and her future husband, my son, and us can all live together," he said. This revelation was unexpected, especially since it hinted at a future where my sister-in-law's potential husband might also join us under the same roof. Shockingly, there was no mention of it being my and Brian's family home, just Brian. It felt like I was being excluded from plans.
The proposed house is slated to be large, yet fitting 4 households on the current site will undoubtedly be tight. While my in-laws and sister-in-law seem to be spearheading the building project, I find myself without a voice in the matter. I anticipate that maintaining such a large home will be quite a challenge. Later, when the home builder and my family went out to review the model room and construction site, my mother-in-law curtly told me, "Stay out of this, it's none of your business." Her words were spiteful, and she looked almost disappointed when I didn't retort. The plans for the new housing are progressing, and while I'm kept in the dark, the rest of the family is preparing for the move. Seeing my husband inactive and disengaged, I questioned him, "Aren't you going to help with the move?" His response was abrupt and tinged with annoyance. "Why should I? Aren't you the one handling it?" This confused me even further. Why was he angry when I was merely trying to understand our plans, especially when I felt so out of the loop about when and where we were moving? As time went on, and whenever I found a moment, I began to prepare for the move in whatever ways I could, still puzzled and frustrated by the lack of communication and the apparent expectations placed upon me. As the days drew closer to the mysterious moving day, I methodically packed our belongings, keeping mine separate from my husband's. My patience with my mother-in-law's hostile demeanor was waning, and I harbored growing suspicions about my husband's secretive discussions concerning the new house. Out of sheer necessity, I asked him, "When are we moving?" His response was dismissive and curt. "Just get ready, you don't need to know, that's it." From snippets of overheard mealtime conversations, it seemed the move was imminent, yet oddly, no one deemed it necessary to inform me directly.
It was as if they viewed me merely as a temporary housemate, not a family member. The reality of our situation abruptly became clear when the movers showed up unannounced while I was cleaning up after breakfast. "Leave them. We'll buy new ones," my mother-in-law said nonchalantly, then added, "By the way, do you plan to move into the new house with us?" Her tone was probing, almost taunting, and in that moment, I realized that they had been deliberately excluding me from discussions about the new house and had been secretive about the moving day as part of a calculated plan to oust me from the family home. My husband, standing silently behind my mother-in-law, laughed along but said nothing, indicating his probable agreement with their scheme. I had anticipated something like this might happen, which is why I had packed my things separately. Now, faced directly with their animosity, my mother-in-law coldly declared, "From now on, only the family will live here. Do as you wish." My sister-in-law, who looked genuinely worried, probably thought I would beg to join them, tearfully pleading my case. Not satisfied with my calm demeanor, my mother-in-law snapped harshly, "Anyone who relies on someone else's earnings should leave now. Brian will build the new house and pay off the loan with his salary. We don't need a freeloader." Her words were laced with anger, but ironically, I was the one who had been planning to leave all along. When I discovered that the financial plan for the new house hinged on my husband Brian repaying the mortgage with his salary, I nearly laughed aloud. It was clear from his expression that he had been left out of the loop. His surprise was palpable as he found himself unable to challenge his visibly irate mother and chose silence instead. His parents seemed convinced that they could preserve their retirement funds, placing the burden of the new home's financial obligations squarely on Brian's shoulders. This revelation only solidified my decision, and I shared my plans with a calm smile. "Got it. I've decided to proceed with divorcing Brian." The news didn't sit well with my mother-in-law, who erupted in shouts. However, my father-in-law and sister-in-law intervened, pulling her away and leaving Brian and me alone in the old house. With the new house address in hand, reluctantly given by Brian after I insisted, I would need it to send the divorce papers. I prepared for my departure. A friend assisted me in moving my few belongings. Before leaving, I took a final step to separate our intertwined lives. I transferred all public utility bills from my in-laws' house into Brian's name.
Returning to my parents' home gave me a temporary respite to regroup. Once settled, I visited the impressive new 4-family home where Brian and his family had moved. Upon arriving, my mother-in-law immediately confronted me, her tone sharp and unwelcoming. Ignoring her outburst, I approached Brian, divorce papers in hand, and requested his signature. As we stood there, about to finalize the end of our chapter together, my mother-in-law turned to him, likely to intervene or express her disapproval once more. As I stood in the grandiose new home my in-laws had moved into, my mother-in-law, unable to contain her scorn, mocked me in a sarcastic tone. "Useless wife. It's because she's not a government worker. Hurry up and say it." Facing her directly, I couldn't help but retort with a touch of irony myself. "What a splendid house. Are you sure you can manage it on Brian's salary?" Her face flushed with anger as she sharply told me, "You're the outsider now, so don't concern yourself with us. Take the divorce papers and leave." I took a moment longer to observe my husband's pale, shocked expression, a silent testament to the gravity of our situation. With the divorce papers in hand, I promptly left their house, my mother-in-law's furious gaze following me out. I headed straight to the town hall to submit the divorce documents, determined to leave that chapter behind and start anew. Feeling drained from the tumult of married life, I decided to live alone, settling into a small apartment close to my work. This new space was just what I needed, free from the constant disputes and the exhausting expectations to uphold a household single-handedly. life became significantly more peaceful without roommates boasting about government employment or shirking household responsibilities. Just as I was beginning to enjoy my newfound tranquility and put thoughts of my husband behind me, an unexpected call disrupted the calm. An unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. It was Brian using a friend's phone. His voice cracked as he pleaded, "I can't pay the loan, Evelyn. Will you come back to me? I can't afford the mortgage, electricity, water bills, or even my phone bill." Assuming he could turn to his family for support, I replied, "Your sister has a stable job and your parents are retired with pensions. They should have some savings, right?" Dismissing his plea, I was prepared for him to reach out to them. However, my ex-husband then reluctantly confessed, revealing more about his desperate situation. As I listened to my husband on the phone, it became painfully clear that his family's financial stability was a facade. Their retirement savings had been devastated by an investment scam, and his sister had accumulated considerable debt through excessive use of credit cards. This once proud family of civil servants, who had always portrayed themselves as financially prudent, was now revealed to be in dire straits. Their struggles became apparent after moving to a new house, which seemed to have stretched their finances to the breaking point. In desperation, they reached out to me, hoping for support or perhaps a reconciliation, but I had no desire to re-engage with them. I firmly declined their request and ended the conversation. Despite repeated calls, I maintained my distance, letting the phone ring unanswered until they finally stopped trying to contact me. Curiosity led me back to their neighborhood sometime later, where I was greeted by the sight of a "for sale" sign outside their recently acquired home. I spoke with a representative from the housing company who happened to be there and learned that my in-laws had sold the house shortly after it was built due to their inability to manage the mortgage. It was revealed that a relative had co-signed the loan and now faced financial difficulties because of this obligation. This was the same family that had once boasted about their secure government jobs and disparaged those in the private sector, including a relative who worked in a private company and had become their co-signer. The family's financial collapse and the subsequent sale of the house had led to tensions and even ostracism from other relatives. It seemed that their previous pretensions of stability and their slight regard for those outside the civil service were now backfiring spectacularly. As I settled into my sofa at home, the irony of the situation struck me. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of my ex-husband and his family, who had once taken pride in their government status, now viewed as burdens by their relatives. They no longer had anyone to impress with tales of bureaucratic importance, and instead, they had become a cautionary tale of financial mismanagement and misplaced pride. The absurdity of their predicament was a stark contrast to the quiet contentment of my own simpler, more genuine lifestyle. Finally, the day arrived, a day I had eagerly awaited. It was time to leave behind the incessant sight of your face and those freeloaders who had done nothing but take without giving back. They should be thankful for the generosity they've received all these years. Resolute, I declared, "I won't be coming back. Thank you for everything until now." Swiftly, I packed my essentials and said goodbye to the house that had been my home at my in-laws for many years. As I stepped out, my mother-in-law's face revealed a hint of satisfaction at my departure. Yet, she was unaware of a poignant secret I carried with me. My name is Megan. I am 35 years old and work remotely from my home. I've been married to Charles for 6 years. Our marriage faced challenges in its 5th year when Charles's previously healthy father became seriously ill, requiring our immediate and constant attention. Initially hesitant to move in with my in-laws, I agreed out of necessity. Charles was their only family capable of providing care. Despite considering quitting my job to manage his care full-time,
My company allowed me to continue working remotely due to my commendable performance record. However, living with my in-laws introduced immediate challenges, exposing me to the classic tensions between a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law. "Megan, hurry up and tend to the cooking and cleaning. How long will you be lazy avoiding your household duties?" my mother-in-law would chide. "I'm working right now. What do you mean I'm always just clicking away at the computer?" I would retort. Amidst the household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law, I managed to leverage my skills and return to my pre-crisis salary after about 4 months of intense effort. When my earnings finally matched their previous peak, I felt a deep sense of joy. Yet, my relentless dedication was fueled by a harsh financial reality. Charles's income alone was insufficient to support us. Despite my hopes for a more relaxed life ahead, the struggle persisted, leading me to contemplate setting aside some savings. As time went on, my financial challenges seemed to multiply inexplicably. It felt like the money in my wallet was evaporating. Curious about this troubling trend, I took a closer look at our expenses. To my dismay, I discovered that Charles had developed a habit of indulging in unnecessary luxuries. Additionally, my mother-in-law had a flair for the extravagant, often spending lavishly on various hobbies and social gatherings. Charles, always eager to please, frequently used our credit cards to fund not just work-related lunches, but also extravagant parties with friends. Amidst this spending spree, the responsibility of household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law fell squarely on my shoulders. I was using almost all of my income to cover our living expenses, making the idea of saving money seem like an unattainable dream. Concerned about our dwindling finances, I decided to address the issue. "Charles, mother, it seems we've been spending excessively," I began cautiously. "If this continues, we might deplete our savings entirely. Could you please consider cutting back on your expenses?" Their response was far from understanding. Charles retorted, "I don't want to appear stingy in front of my colleagues and subordinates. Can't you understand that?" "I understand maintaining good relationships with your coworkers is important, but it's not necessary to pay for their expenses every time," I reasoned with him. "What about the nights out at girls' bars? Surely that has nothing to do with work." They harshly dismissed my concerns, leaving me frustrated and anxious about our financial future. As I tried to balance our household's needs with the ongoing financial irresponsibility, it became increasingly clear that I needed to find a way to curb the spending or risk serious financial turmoil. I confronted Charles. "It seems like you just want to have fun, doesn't it? You come home drunk and start talking about your outings even when no one asks. It feels like you enjoy those times more than being with me." I couldn't hide my frustration anymore. My mother-in-law, however, simply laughed off my concerns and sided with Charles. "I'm glad Mom understands, and she's right," Charles agreed confidently. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law defended her spending. "If I didn't go to my classes, I'd just be stuck at home all day. I'm taking these classes with my friends to enjoy the time I have." I was left to grapple with their harsh words, which seemed to echo endlessly in my ears. They labeled me a terrible daughter-in-law, criticizing me for not earning an income, even though I was dedicated to managing the household chores and caring for my father-in-law.
In their eyes, this made me unworthy of voicing any complaints, an idea that baffled me. Despite their judgment, I knew the truth. I was working diligently from home, contributing a steady income to our household while balancing housework and caregiving. Their skepticism and belittling attitude towards my remote work were disheartening. To add insult to injury, my mother-in-law had crafted a narrative for Charles that painted her as the sole caregiver for my father-in-law, depicting me as a lazy homemaker. This twisted perception of my role and efforts left me utterly speechless and pained by the injustice. Throughout the countless times I considered leaving the difficult situation at my in-laws, it was my deep concern for my father-in-law that kept me grounded. From the early days of my marriage, he had always treated me with genuine kindness. a stark contrast to the treatment I received from Charles and my mother-in-law. His sincere expressions of gratitude, often calling me a wonderful daughter-in-law, deeply touched my heart. Whenever he needed care, he would apologize for the inconvenience, always expressing gratitude for my dedication. These moments provided me solace and a strong sense of purpose in caring for him. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving him at the mercy of Charles and my mother-in-law. My father-in-law seemed acutely aware of the family dynamics and recognized my contributions not only in caregiving, but also in maintaining our household's financial stability. His words of appreciation were not just comforting, they fortified me, providing the strength to continue in an environment that often felt hostile. The fear of what might happen to the household without my stabilizing presence was significant, but my greater worry was for the well-being of my beloved father-in-law. Thus, I resolved to stay and provide him with dedicated care until he passed away a year later. His funeral was an emotional battleground for me. Amidst my profound grief, my tears were met with cold disapproval, adding to the weight of the loss. This reaction only underscored the complexity and emotional challenge of my situation, yet it also reaffirmed the importance of my role in his final days. "Why are you crying so much, Megan? The father-in-law has passed away. Isn't it natural to mourn like this?" I was questioned, yet my response only seemed to irk my mother-in-law. She accused me of making it sound like she had never taken care of him, but the reality was quite the opposite. My mother-in-law had been largely absent from my father-in-law's caregiving. Her focus on her hobbies and frequent social outings meant that the bulk of the caregiving responsibilities fell on me. Despite my efforts, she presented herself as the downtrodden and pitiful mother-in-law to those outside our immediate family circle, portraying me as the harsh and cruel daughter-in-law to our relatives. This portrayal seemed to make it appear as though I was being unfairly harsh on her. Even as I grieved, I found myself criticized by those who had little insight into the true dynamics of our household. Out of frustration, I began to distance myself from these relatives, a decision that Charles quickly noticed. Charles confronted me saying, "You embarrassed Mom in front of everyone." This accusation baffled me. "That makes no sense," I replied. "I was merely crying over the death of the father-in-law." "Yet, your mom found it odd how much I cried." "I never once said she hadn't taken care of him at all. I was simply expressing my sorrow over losing someone I deeply cared about." As the argument escalated, Charles accused me of insulting his mother and suggested that if their misunderstanding of my grief was so upsetting to me, maybe I should reconsider my actions. In defense, I reiterated that my tears were purely out of grief for the loss of my father-in-law, whom I had always cherished and cared for, not as a critique or insult to anyone else. After my father-in-law's passing, the tension between my husband and me escalated, leading to a fierce argument that required the intervention of relatives to calm down. Following this, I chose to remain silent towards my husband as the funeral proceedings wrapped up. Shortly thereafter, a lawyer arrived to discuss the will and the distribution of the estate.
The lawyer began, "I'd like to go over the contents of the will regarding your late father's estate. Firstly, to his wife and daughter-in-law, Megan, he has left half of his cash assets to each of you. To his son, Charles, he has left the ownership of the family land and home." My mother-in-law immediately interjected, "If Charles gets the land and the house, why is Megan receiving an inheritance? She isn't related by blood." The lawyer replied, "Your husband was deeply grateful for the dedicated care Megan provided to him. He wanted to express his gratitude by including her in the inheritance. This decision is final and cannot be changed." Unable to accept this, my mother-in-law accused me. "I can't believe it. You were caring for him just to get the inheritance, weren't you?" I defended myself. I've had a good relationship with my father-in-law since I married into this family. I took care of him out of love and respect to show my gratitude for how he always treated me. Despite her ongoing accusations, suggesting that my care amounted to psychological manipulation, my mother-in-law eventually exhausted her protests. The lawyer, resuming the discussion, affirmed, "That was your father's decision." This revelation was a vindication of my genuine affection and care for my father-in-law, affirming that his gratitude towards me was genuine and legally recognized, despite the bitter suspicions voiced by others. As the lawyer confirmed the terms of the will, expressing gratitude for my dedicated care, my mother-in-law's previously discontented expression unexpectedly turned into a smile. "Yes, that's great. I understand," she exclaimed with a nod. Confused, my husband asked her, "What do you mean?" It seemed strange for her to switch her stance so suddenly. With an air of satisfaction, my mother-in-law explained, "Now that Dad's gone, we no longer need to rely on Megan. Her inheritance is just like severance pay. We don't need her in this house anymore." She had grossly misunderstood my father-in-law's intentions, interpreting the will as an opportune moment to sever ties with me, rather than as a recognition of my contributions. Unbeknownst to her, this was exactly as my father-in-law had planned. Before his passing, he had confided in me his wish for me to be free from the constraints of living under the same roof as my in-laws after his demise. He designed the will not only as a show of gratitude, but as a clever ruse to facilitate my departure in a way that seemed natural to others, including deceiving my husband and mother-in-law. Misinterpreting his true intentions, my mother-in-law saw this as a chance to push me out of the family. Seizing the moment and concealing my actual desire to leave, I feigned shock and sadness. "Father-in-law, why would you treat me like this?" I lamented, giving the impression that I was just another caretaker in his eyes. Turning to Charles with tears in my eyes, I pleaded, "You can't understand Megan anymore, right? Why don't you just divorce her?" After a moment of contemplation, touched by the emotion I displayed and perhaps swayed by his mother's influence, Charles replied, "You know what? Let's get a divorce." This dramatic turn of events played right into the hidden plan my father-in-law and I had crafted, setting me on a path to regain my independence and start anew, away from the constraints and conflicts of my in-laws' home. After the reading of the will, Charles inherited the family home and land, and his mother received a portion of the cash. With these assets secured, Charles casually remarked, "There's no longer any need to worry about living arrangements, so it's okay if Megan leaves." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, although I knew too well. "Just what I said," Charles replied, his tone indifferent. "I hate to ask, but could you leave our house and agree to the divorce?" Realizing there was no place for me in their plans, I accepted the inevitable. "Understood. I guess there's no place for me here anymore?" With a controlled calmness, I opened the drawer, retrieved a document, and handed it to him. It was a notice of filing for divorce, prepared soon after our last major argument. Charles quickly signed the document, his relief palpable. "Finally, I don't have to deal with you anymore. A non-working freeloader should just get out. You should be grateful we put up with you." "Is that so? Okay, I understand. I'll leave. Thank you for everything up to now," I replied, masking the turmoil inside with a facade of gratitude. As I exited, my mother-in-law's face lit up with glee, blissfully unaware of what the future might hold for their household without me. I didn't hesitate. Once out of their home, I immediately submitted the divorce notice to City Hall.
Arriving at the apartment I had secured in advance, I stepped into the spacious, empty room. The echo of my own words filled the space. Finally, I can be by myself. This is great. Overwhelmed with joy, I relished the newfound freedom, liberated from a marriage that had become increasingly suffocating. Here in this new space, I could start fresh, embrace solitude, and rebuild my life on my terms. My deep gratitude goes to my late father-in-law for crafting a clever plan that facilitated my departure from the stifling environment at my in-laws' home. With this newfound independence, I settled into a comfortable life on my own, cherishing the freedom to continue my remote work. This lifestyle not only honed my time management skills, but also enhanced my productivity, leading to an increase in my income. I enjoyed a peaceful existence, free from any external meddling, until an unexpected call from my ex-husband Charles disrupted the tranquility. It had been a while since we spoke, and I was perplexed. "Why are you calling me, Charles? Weren't you the one who wanted me to disappear?" I asked. "Megan, please help us. We're in a pinch," Charles pleaded, his voice strained. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. "What kind of joke is this? My salary hasn't changed, but suddenly you're running out of money? How can you not manage?" With a mix of amusement and finality, I prepared to deliver a stark reality check. "That's because you no longer have my income to supplement yours. You squandered your entire salary on yourselves. Maybe it's about time you and your mother learned some financial responsibility as adults." Confused, Charles asked, "What do you mean? You still don't get it?" This moment underscored just how much they had relied on me without acknowledging it, and now they were feeling the consequences of their financial irresponsibility. It was a bitter lesson on the importance of prudence and planning, one that they were learning the hard way. I explained the situation clearly to Charles. "While you were indulging in luxuries, my salary of about $6,500 a month was covering our living expenses. Now I'm earning even more, and I'm doing it all without anyone holding me back." Frustrated and perhaps realizing his predicament, Charles made a desperate plea. "Megan, can't we start over? It was a mistake to let you go. I want to make things right." I scoffed at his sudden change of heart. "It's clear you're just after my income. Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see your face again. What happened to the inheritance your mother received? She should be living comfortably with that." Charles confessed, "It's about to run out. We spent it on a shopping spree and overseas trips, and lost half of it in the casino." Unmoved by his confession, I replied sharply, "A foolish mother breeds a foolish son. I have nothing more to say to you. I'm a stranger now, and I can't do anything for you, nor do I want to." Desperate, Charles implored, "Don't be so heartless. Help me. This has nothing to do with me. There's nothing more to talk about. I'm hanging up. Don't call me again." I declared before ending the call and promptly canceling the contract for the mobile phone I was using. A year later, while passing by my former mother-in-law's house, I noticed it had become an empty lot, likely sold due to financial struggles. Unperturbed, I continued with my life, enjoying my newfound spare time attending a wine class I had long been interested in. There, I met a man 3 years my senior who took our relationship seriously. After a year and a half of dating, we got married. He is the executive of a well-known company, humble despite his high salary, and with a warm, wonderful character. We respect each other's careers, leading to a fulfilling married life. Reflecting on these changes, I can't help but feel that, in a way, this was a form of retribution, a gift from my father-in-law, allowing me to find true happiness and respect in a relationship. Recently, after a week-long trip overseas, I was surprised when I received an exciting call from my mother-in-law, Jessica. She enthusiastically mentioned that she had found $32,000. I was baffled by this because, as a freelancer, while I maintain some emergency savings, I don't usually keep such a large amount of cash on hand. Plus, my banking card was secure with me, and no one else should have been able to withdraw such a significant sum without my knowledge. Jessica explained that she took the money from a drawer in our sideboard, assuming that we were well off financially. I appreciated her good intentions, but I was confused about why she thought I had given her permission to take the money. This left me puzzled over where the $32,000 had come from. The mystery lingered until a month later when Kevin, presumably her husband, returned home. This unexpected resolution still left some tension in the air. Over that month, Jessica made over 136 calls to me, which I chose not to answer initially. When I finally did pick up, she accused me of something unclear. It seemed she was upset, but I couldn't understand why. Her persistent calls had become a source of annoyance, and when I eventually confronted her, she started blaming me for reasons I couldn't grasp. This confusion and the accusations added a layer of complexity to our interactions, leaving me to sort through the misunderstandings and the surprising discovery of the money. I realized that the situation was evolving just as it had been set in motion. Over the phone, I could hear Jessica's voice ringing out, but I learned she was addressing Lisa, a 33-year-old freelance jewelry designer. Lisa shared her ambitions and personal challenges with me. She expressed a strong desire to have children, but her demanding career often stood in the way. Her husband, Kevin, also 33, had originally held a regular job, but had since shifted his focus to help manage her burgeoning career. When Lisa and Kevin married, she was just starting out and not earning much, so they relied heavily on Kevin's steady income. However, by the time Lisa reached her 30s, her career had stabilized and grown to the point where she needed help managing her busy schedule. Seeing the potential in their partnership, Kevin decided to leave his stable job and join Lisa as a business partner. With Kevin's support, Lisa's business flourished, securing contracts with well-known international brands. Despite their professional success, they faced challenges, particularly with Kevin's mother, Jessica. Living alone in the family home, Jessica had a skewed perception of their lifestyle. She believed they were living luxuriously, constantly attending lavish parties and dinners with corporate executives. While these events were indeed part of Lisa's job responsibilities as a jewelry designer, Jessica viewed them as extravagant leisure activities. Jessica's misunderstandings extended to financial expectations as well. She often asked them for money to host her social gatherings, assuming that their perceived lavish lifestyle could easily support her desires. This ongoing misconception created tension as Lisa and Kevin navigated their successful yet demanding lives while trying to manage Jessica's expectations and frequent requests for financial help. While I'm financially capable of supporting Jessica, the lifestyle she imagines us leading isn't as glamorous as it appears. The events we attend are costly and are essential business commitments that we cannot skip. Living in luxury is a part of our professional image. It involves dressing elegantly and dining at upscale restaurants. Despite this, Jessica often shares her envy of our lifestyle, usually with a sarcastic undertone, although I consistently decline her requests for money. Kevin, being her son, occasionally gives in to her demands, seeing it as a minor compromise to maintain peace and prevent disruptions to our work. However, this only seems to encourage Jessica's requests, which escalates our frustration. Recently, Jessica visited us and insisted that Kevin buy her a new dress for an upcoming social event. Although we suggested a more budget-friendly three-piece suit, she was adamant about getting a lavish dress to fit the occasion's perceived grandeur. In her view, the right attire was crucial, and she even demanded a matching handbag, expecting us to cover that expense as well. To manage these constant financial demands more efficiently, Kevin decided to set up a credit card in Jessica's name, instructing her to use it for her expenses. Initially, she went overboard with her spending and had to be cautioned by Kevin. He then made it a requirement for her to consult him before making any significant purchases. This approach was intended to give her some autonomy while keeping her spending in check, aiming to balance her desires with our need to manage our finances responsibly. Despite having access to a credit card, Jessica's spending habits didn't change much. She even bought an expensive ring without informing us beforehand. The costs quickly escalated, creating a financial burden. Kevin, who was responsible for the bills, realized that the situation was unsustainable. Frustrated by her disregard for the financial implications, he decided to impose a spending limit on her card. Jessica was irate when she discovered she couldn't pay for her latest shopping spree because of the new limit. She stormed into our house, upset and questioning the fairness of the restriction. She argued that her enjoyment of luxury and fun wasn't much different from our professional need to dress up and attend glamorous events. We tried to explain that our appearances at product launches and parties were essential aspects of our work, often hosted in luxurious settings. However, Jessica saw this as mere enjoyment on our part, not recognizing the professional obligations behind these activities. After the spending cap was introduced, Jessica's complaints subsided somewhat, though she still occasionally voiced her discontent to Kevin. Life continued relatively smoothly, and as the year drew to a close, an exciting business opportunity presented itself. A foreign brand offered us a chance to expand our business internationally. This proposal thrilled me, as it was a step towards joining the ranks of top-tier designers. Kevin, managing the business aspects, also recognized it as a unique and valuable opportunity that we needed to seize. Despite the exciting opportunity that lay before us, Kevin and I had concerns about how Jessica would react, given her history of lavish spending. When we broke the news of our potential expansion overseas, her reaction was predictable. Jessica accused us of planning to live extravagantly abroad under the guise of work. She feared that we intended to relocate permanently. Trying to soothe her fears, I reassured her that we would return once our business affairs stabilized overseas. Still, she seemed anxious about being left behind. The ongoing debates drained both Kevin and me. Realizing we couldn't take her along but wanting to offer some consolation, Kevin, tired from the constant arguments, proposed a different solution. He suggested we send her on a week-long vacation. Jessica, half pleased and half skeptical, accepted this compromise. Kevin committed to covering her flight and hotel costs, hoping this would bring some peace. However, the tranquility was short-lived. A few days later, while Kevin was preoccupied with the overseas arrangements, Jessica dropped by our house. She had another request. She wanted additional money to shop during her trip abroad. When I inquired about the credit card Kevin had given her, she admitted he had taken it back, fearing she might misuse it due to fluctuating currency rates. I explained that I couldn't authorize any financial assistance without Kevin's consent. The conversation ended with Jessica leaving in a huff. As the new year dawned, Jessica embarked on her 10-day journey. Upon her return, she shared a surprising revelation that would change our understanding of the entire situation. Jessica called me, bubbling with excitement from her trip, but soon admitted that she had overspent on souvenirs. Feeling increasingly fed up, I confronted her about the money she claimed I had saved for her, a sum I had absolutely no memory of setting aside. The conversation quickly took a sharp turn. I knew I had savings in my bank account, earmarked for business emergencies, but it was impossible for Jessica to have withdrawn any cash from there without my consent. She then revealed that she had found $32,000 in a drawer of our house's sideboard. I was baffled. Keeping such a large sum of cash at home was out of the question for us. I informed Jessica that if she had indeed taken money from our house without permission, it constituted theft, regardless of her being family. I stressed the gravity of the situation, particularly if Kevin had earmarked that money for an important business deal. Throughout her trip, there had been no disruptions in our business transactions.
which made her claim even more suspicious.
Jessica, with a casual demeanor, admitted to using the money, as if informing me would settle the matter. I pointed out that taking money without permission was not only unethical, but also illegal. I expressed my concerns about her entitled reasoning. She defensively retorted that since we live so extravagantly, she saw no harm in sharing a bit of that lifestyle, suggesting that it was almost like doing a favor for a parent. This rationale only deepened my concerns about her understanding of boundaries and responsibility. I found Jessica's reasoning to be wholly inappropriate. She had taken money without permission, yet she seemed unconcerned about the gravity of her actions. She promised I would speak with Kevin upon his return, confident that he, being her son, would understand. She even made a passing remark that $32,000 wasn't much to him. Although I agreed to relay her message, I was deeply unsettled by the entire ordeal and amazed by her blatant lack of awareness. Ending the call, she nonchalantly thanked me and asked me to pass her regards to Kevin. Still perplexed about the presence of $32,000 in cash at home, I confronted Kevin about it when he returned that night. He explained that he had withdrawn the money from his bank account 12 days prior for an urgent payment that required cash. I was surprised he chose to keep such a large sum in a drawer, given the obvious security risks. Kevin appeared troubled when he inquired if I knew anything about the cash. Earlier that day, Jessica had called, gleefully thanking us for the $32,000, mentioning she had a wonderful time spending it. I was confused about her statement until it became clear that the money did indeed belong to Kevin. However, we were still clueless about the intended purpose of such a substantial amount. I questioned Kevin why he had left such a large sum at home, especially since we typically conducted transactions through bank transfers. He revealed that after limiting Jessica's credit card limit, she had covertly borrowed money from various other sources, including consumer finance cards and other credit cards she had opened without his knowledge. When Kevin discovered this, it added another layer of complexity to our already strained dealings with Jessica. Kevin took a decisive step by collecting all of Jessica's credit cards and preparing cash to address her escalating debts. Despite giving her the money, he was aware of the risk that she might spend it carelessly. This approach clarified some aspects of the situation, yet the reasons behind Jessica's actions remained puzzling. I was inclined to handle the repayment of her debts directly through bank transfers, thinking this would be more straightforward and traceable. However, Kevin preferred to maintain fewer records in our bank accounts, aiming to preserve trust with our business partners and keep our bookkeeping straightforward. Thus, he chose to withdraw cash and handle the payments personally. Supporting Jessica's overseas trip was essentially a parting gesture, acknowledging that once we moved abroad, we wouldn't be as available to assist her as before. As time went on, Jessica began to call me frequently, reaching up to 136 calls a day. Kevin had advised me not to engage with her excessive attempts to contact us, but her persistence raised my concerns. One day, her voice, tinged with desperation, broke through as she apologized for the incessant calls during our busy period of moving preparations. She revealed that she was facing daily payment demands and that Kevin was not responding to her calls. Desperate, she turned to me as her last resort for help. I was taken aback that Kevin would take such a drastic measure against his mother, particularly if he had indeed set aside money to clear her debts. Had he used it as intended, perhaps Jessica would not have been overwhelmed with collection efforts from finance companies and consumer lenders. Now she was bombarded with collection letters and calls, seemingly powerless to resolve her financial woes. This situation painted a distressing picture, highlighting the complexities and strains within family dynamics and financial management. The whole situation seemed like something out of a drama series, and when Jessica called pleading for help, claiming it was a son's duty to assist his mother, I couldn't help but feel the gravity of her distress. I mentioned her pleas to Kevin when he came home, but his response was unexpectedly harsh. He coldly dismissed her, pointing out that Jessica had squandered her chances herself. Following Kevin's example, and despite my desire to help, I decided to block Jessica's number. She was Kevin's mother, and if he chose to distance himself, there was little I could do. As the day of our overseas move drew closer, and I was surrounded by boxes in our cluttered home, a profound sense of helplessness washed over me concerning Jessica's predicament. It turned out that the situation had escalated far beyond what I had imagined. Jessica had to sell her house to settle her debts, a drastic measure that underscored the severity of her financial woes. In addition to the $32,000 that Kevin had earmarked for helping her, it emerged that she had concealed even more debts. The total amount was so substantial that even after selling her property, she couldn't fully clear her obligations. The revelation that our family home had to be sold was a stark and painful reminder of how deep Jessica's troubles ran, leaving an unimaginable total balance still outstanding. This drastic solution highlighted the harsh realities of financial mismanagement and its devastating consequences on personal and family life. Kevin, although saddened, recognized that there was little we could do about the loss of his childhood home. The emotional weight of losing a place filled with memories because of his own mother's actions undoubtedly brought a profound sense of loss. Now, Jessica was living in a modest apartment, struggling to manage her remaining debts with a part-time job. At her age, finding work was challenging, and though I felt a twinge of sympathy for her, the reality was that her financial mismanagement had led to this situation. It was a stark reminder that even in later years, taking responsibility for one's actions is crucial. Meanwhile, our business was flourishing overseas, opening doors to opportunities I had never anticipated back home. We received inquiries from various brands, and I found myself navigating offers from unexpected places, an exciting development that significantly broadened our professional horizons. The success was gratifying, but it came with its challenges. My schedule was so packed that finding time to rest was difficult, and Kevin was equally busy with numerous responsibilities. Amid this bustling new life, the thought of starting a family seemed more like a distant dream. As I pondered these thoughts, gazing out at the foreign cityscape from my window, I reflected on the stark contrast between our thriving new environment and the difficulties back home. This juxtaposition underscored the complexities of life, where professional success often coexists with personal challenges and tough familial decisions. Hello, my name is Amy Christina, 30 years old, once found solace in her bustling career until her mother fell ill and passed away, followed soon by her father due to heart complications. Being an only child, Amy faced her grief alone, submerged in work until Brian, her then colleague, reached out. His companionship blossomed into love, and eventually they married, with his family welcoming her warmly. On a particularly harsh winter day, a heated argument erupted between Amy and Brian over a failed cooking attempt. "You're awful at this, Brian. Why don't you go freeze outside with your ruined dish?" she exclaimed in frustration, slamming the window shut and locking it. Outside, Brian, affected more by the cold than his botched culinary efforts, only smirked at Amy's distress and pulled the curtains close, leaving her shivering by the locked window. As the bitter cold penetrated her skin, Amy, pregnant and increasingly feeble from the dropping temperature, pounded on the glass, her pleas ignored. Just as her strength waned, a passerby noticed her plight and offered assistance. The next day, Amy returned only to find Brian outside, exposed to the merciless winter, his condition dire. Vincent, the helpful stranger, confronted Brian. "Isn't this what you deserved? If you can't handle the heat of the kitchen, maybe the cold outside will teach you," Vincent remarked sternly. Amy, despite the recent ordeal, could not help but feel compassion for Brian. As he shivered helplessly, she decided to call for medical help. "Brian, do you need anything before help arrives?" Amy asked, approaching him with a blanket. Amidst the chaos, memories of their relationship, from comforting support during her darkest days to the joyous celebration with his family at their wedding, flooded back. "You've truly brought home a wonderful woman," his mother had said, affirming their bond. Even though their marriage had its trials, including this latest ordeal, Amy's resolve to mend things was unshaken. She remembered how Brian supported her when she had no one else, how they planned future outings like visiting the new cafe by the train station that Brian had excitedly mentioned. Reconciliation seemed possible as Amy wrapped the blanket around Brian, the cold receding with the warmth of remembered love and the hope of forgiveness. Brian raised a concern about his younger brother. "But what about my younger brother? He can be quite a handful, can't he?" "Oh, he's doing just fine," I reassured him. Scott, my brother-in-law, often kept to himself, working from home and spending a lot of time in his room. However, once I took an interest in his projects and asked him about his work, he was more than willing to share details with me. This helped me connect better with Brian's family. A few years into our marriage, I learned that I was pregnant with Brian's child. The morning sickness was overwhelming, and I made the difficult decision to leave my job. Brian supported my decision, saying, "I think that's a good call. Don't overdo it." Quitting wasn't a decision I made lightly. It was thoroughly discussed with Brian and his family. Thankfully, Brian and Scott earned enough to support our growing family comfortably. Additionally, my savings, along with my father-in-law still working and my mother-in-law having a part-time job, meant that my quitting wouldn't financially burden anyone. Despite this, someone recently commented, "Wow, pregnant women have it easy. No work, no complaints." This couldn't be further from the truth. Ironically, Brian had started to complain about me not working, even though he was the one who initially suggested I quit. He accused, "You're just freeloading without a job, acting all high and mighty." "Who's acting high and mighty? I'm the one who always cleans up after you," I retorted. Being naturally competitive, I was determined to prove Brian wrong. "If you had a problem, you should have spoken up during our discussions. You were the one who brought it up, right?" I reminded him to focus on his responsibilities instead of complaining. Our parents-in-law were on my side and supported my decision, but Brian felt isolated. He didn't get along well with Scott, further strained their relationship. Scott felt undervalued by Brian because he worked from home and often confided in me that Brian neither listened to him nor appreciated his contributions. This disconnect was why Scott rarely engaged in family discussions. Brian resented this and would vent more when we were alone. "Just because my family likes you doesn't mean you should act all high and mighty," he would say. "I'm not acting that way. Everyone is just being reasonable," I defended myself. Even in our private moments, I stood my ground, a stark contrast to the times when I never lost an argument with Brian before. Navigating these complex family dynamics required patience and understanding. Despite the challenges, it was essential to maintain open communication and empathy, striving for harmony within the family. As the morning sickness took hold, I found myself too drained to engage in arguments. Brian had a fixed notion that not working equated to laziness. "Pregnancy isn't an illness. If you're not working, Brian thinks you're just lazy," was his harsh judgment. Despite this, I knew the truth. Nurturing a new life was an immense effort. Scott recognized this too, reassuring me, "Pregnancy isn't an illness, but what Amy is doing, growing a life inside her, is hard work." Vincent, my other brother-in-law,
also saw the effort I was putting in and started to intervene whenever Brian voiced his criticisms. Each time Brian complained, Vincent would report it to their parents, resulting in Brian being admonished for his lack of empathy. With Scott's and Vincent's support, I managed to maintain some humor about our unusual situation, jokingly musing, "At this rate, it's hard to tell who the real father is," as I rub my belly. My in-laws were vigilant and supportive, hoping along with me that Brian would come to see the strain his attitudes were putting on our relationship. However, just as we were adjusting to this dynamic, Brian began coming home late regularly. He claimed it was due to overtime, but his excuses seemed suspect, especially when he started missing entire nights at home, even on his days off, claiming he was called into work. Suspicion crept in, not just for me, but for his parents too. We started to wonder if Brian was being unfaithful. Together, we attempted to gather evidence, but catching him in the act proved difficult. He always appeared to be at the office, and there was no direct evidence of him being with someone else. "We can't know what's going on inside the company," his parents concluded, somewhat defeated. I even reached out to one of his colleagues to see if she noticed anything unusual, but she reassured me that all seemed normal at work and advised, "Hey Amy, take it easy." As my morning sickness worsened, rendering me unable to manage any household chores, my father-in-law stepped in to cook, and my mother-in-law took over other household duties, with Scott helping wherever he could. This family support kept our home running smoothly despite my inability to contribute as I had before. Yet, one night, Brian, perhaps feeling guilty or frustrated by seeing his parents compensate for my incapacitation, woke me abruptly. "You should be ashamed of yourself lying around all day not doing any housework even though you're a homemaker. Why are you even here?" he accused. I was deeply hurt, but Scott was quick to defend me, firing back at Brian. "That's rich coming from someone who's not pulling his weight as a husband." This tension highlighted the stark contrasts in our household. While my in-laws and I adapted to the realities of pregnancy, Brian struggled to find his role, often lashing out instead of lending support. As each day passed, it became more evident that open communication and empathy were crucial if we were to navigate these challenging times together. Even though I'm the eldest, Vincent always had something to say about my supposed shortcomings. "Well, you're not exactly the role model type of brother. You've always been a bit of a know-it-all," he retorted sharply. The tension between us escalated quickly, nearly turning physical before our parents intervened, pulling us apart. After the confrontation, our parents were disappointed with Brian. "That's enough. Do whatever you want, but where are you going without talking to me?" they scolded as Brian stormed off without a word. In his absence, they apologized to me on his behalf, trying to smooth over the rough edges of the situation. However, Brian's behavior had been deteriorating over time, and it was clear that some resolution was needed soon. On a particular Saturday, when my in-laws had previously planned to attend a local event, they expressed their concern about leaving me alone due to Brian's recent unpredictable moods. "I'm concerned about leaving you," my mother-in-law voiced her worries. "I'll be fine," I assured them. "My morning sickness has eased up a lot." Reluctantly, they left, filled with concern, while at the same time Vincent had to leave for overnight commitments. "I'm sorry for leaving at this time," he said, to which I replied, "It's okay, take care." Shortly after everyone departed, I found myself alone with Brian, who was still asleep at home. Despite not feeling completely well, I decided to get up and be proactive around the house. I didn't want to give Brian any reason to criticize me for being idle. Thankfully, my father-in-law had prepared plenty of dishes ahead of time and stored them in the fridge. I started cleaning and doing laundry, taking it easy but making sure to keep busy. Around noon, Brian finally woke up, his appearance unkempt and his demeanor grumpy. "Hey, breakfast," he demanded. still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. I rolled my eyes at his command and fetched some leftovers from the fridge. "What's that?" he asked, peering at the plate. "Leftovers. Your dad made them. You can't even cook as a homemaker?" Brian remarked snidely. His comment struck a nerve. "Why do you say things like this? Don't you realize I'm pregnant with your child?" "There's no excuse for your behavior," I responded, frustrated by his lack of empathy and support. "Sorry, but right now my main job is taking care of our baby. Household chores can wait," I declared firmly, prioritizing my health and our unborn child over the immediate demands of housework. "How dare you talk to your husband like that?" Brian shouted back at me, his voice rising in anger. At that moment, the challenges of our relationship were laid bare, compounded by the stress of pregnancy and the lack of support from Brian. It was clear that we needed a better understanding and a shift in our dynamics if we were to navigate this critical phase of our lives together. As the tension between Brian and me escalated, Scott unexpectedly burst through the door, momentarily breaking the strain of the moment. I could hear Brian and him arguing loudly just outside the room. "You stay out of this," Brian snapped at Scott before storming off to his room, muttering under his breath. Shortly after, he left the house in a huff. Scott let out a heavy sigh as he entered the room. "You okay?" he asked, his concern evident in his voice. "Yeah, what brings you here?" I replied, trying to mask my unease. "I just came to pick up something I forgot," Scott explained, his eyes reflecting the worry he felt for me. I chuckled, noting how much he resembled his mother in that moment. "It's all right, go ahead, don't worry about me," I assured him, trying to ease his concern. "Okay then, I'll head out," Scott said, pausing hesitantly before leaving. His departure left me alone with my thoughts, pondering the drastic changes in Brian and how distant he had become from the man I first met. Divorce seemed like a looming reality, yet I still hoped to maintain a relationship with my in-laws. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I decided to lie down, and before I knew it, I had fallen into a deep sleep. "Amy, time to wake up." Brian's voice gently stirred me from sleep. I mumbled as I sat up, bracing myself for another round of reprimands. However, instead of the cold demeanor I expected, Brian offered a sincere smile. "I wanted to let you sleep, but it's already evening," he said softly, surprising me with his gentle tone. "I've prepared dinner, so when you're ready, come join me," he added, leaving the room. As I noticed a blanket draped over me, I wondered if it was Brian who had covered me with it, showing care in his gesture.
I made my way to the kitchen and found the dishes my father-in-law had made, already warmed up and ready to eat. Brian looked at me with a genuine expression of remorse. "I'm sorry, Amy," he began, his voice sincere. "When I found out we were having a baby, I was thrilled, but then I got overwhelmed and took it out on you. This cake is my way of apologizing." He presented a cake to me, and though his gesture couldn't erase all the past hurts, his genuine apology warmed my heart. For now, I decided to forgive him and enjoy our meal together. "Look, it's snowing!" Brian exclaimed with a childlike excitement, breaking the calm of our dinner. "Oh, you're right. Let's go see," I replied, following him to the window. The sight of snow falling against the night sky was mesmerizing. Coming from a place where it rarely snowed, this was a special moment for me. Without hesitation, I moved closer to the window. "Let's open it," Brian suggested, and together we watched the peaceful snowflakes drift down, a quiet yet hopeful symbol of a new beginning for us. "But it'll be cold," I protested as Brian reached for a jacket. "Just put on a jacket," he insisted, draping it over my shoulders and opening the window to the chilly wind. I braced myself against the cold, but suddenly Brian hugged me. Before I knew it, he had nudged me outside, and as I turned around, I saw him grinning mischievously. "You're a homemaker who doesn't do the housework. That makes you a bad wife. Think about that tonight," he teased. "Excuse me? What are you saying? You can't even cook," I retorted, my voice sharp with frustration. With that, Brian shut and locked the window. I rushed to the glass, pleading with him to open it as I pounded on the glass, but he just grinned and drew the curtains closed. The cold began to bite, and my body, warm just moments before from the heater, rapidly lost its heat. Panic set in as I thought about the baby inside me and how the cold could affect us both. Just as I felt like I might pass out from the cold and shock, a car pulled up beside me. "Why were you out here at this time of night?" It was Scott, who had come home earlier than planned because he was worried about Brian. The car's heater brought relief as warmth seeped back into my bones. "We should go to the hospital just to be safe," Scott suggested, his tone laced with concern as he drove me there. Thanks to his quick thinking, both my baby and I were checked and found to be okay. While I was being examined, Scott arranged for us to stay at a hotel for the night and then left to take care of some other matters. Feeling the stress of the evening start to ebb away, I rubbed my belly, whispering to my baby, "I'm so relieved you're going to be strong, right?" Exhaustion overcame me quickly, and I fell asleep as soon as I lay down on the hotel bed. The next morning, as we left the hospital, Scott checked on me. "Oh, Amy, are you feeling better now?" "Yes, I'm completely fine now. Thank you so much," I replied, overwhelmed with gratitude. "No problem. Shall we head home?" Scott suggested. As we arrived home, I was stunned to see Brian outside, freezing and naked in the yard. Scott approached him with a cold gaze and tone. "This is what you said, right? If you can't cook properly, then freeze outside." Brian, shivering uncontrollably, couldn't muster a proper response. The stark contrast between Scott's caring demeanor and Brian's harsh prank highlighted the tension and need for serious changes in our relationship dynamics. The incident was a jarring reminder of the support I needed and who was truly there for me when it mattered most. Scott's voice cut through the tension, soft yet urgent. "I'll call an ambulance out of kindness. Amy, do you want to say anything to him before it arrives?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I nodded and stepped closer to Brian, who lay confused and remorseful. "It's because of you that our baby was almost in danger. I will never forgive you. Just wait," I told him firmly, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. Later, after Brian had been taken to the hospital, I turned to Scott, seeking clarity on the events that had unfolded after he had dropped me off at the hotel. He recounted the night's ordeal. Returning home alone, he found Brian asleep in the living room. Not alone, but rather in the company of another woman who appeared to be his mistress. Brian, thinking he wouldn't be caught, had brought her home with the confidence of someone who believed his deceit would remain hidden. Enraged, Scott didn't hesitate. He threw Brian out of the house, forcing him to face the cold reality of his actions in his birthday suit. Scott then dealt with the woman, interrogating her, gathering evidence, and responsibly sending her back to her own family, which was unaware of her actions. As dawn approached, after ensuring everything was taken care of, Scott took a short nap in his car before coming back to pick me up. That morning, as he shared these details, his voice was calm but tired. "I've spoken to my parents. They're coming back today," he informed me, a gentle smile touching his weary features. He stayed by my side, a comforting presence in the storm. "It's going to be okay now, Scott. Thank you so much," I said, my heart filled with gratitude for his steadfast support. Scott simply nodded, his reply humble. "I just did what needed to be done. I want you to feel safe at home." When Brian returned, he was full of apologies and excuses, quickly facing the consequences of his actions. He was forced to pay child support and was removed from our home. "I'm so sorry, Amy. It was just a mistake. I truly love only you," he pleaded. But I found myself tuning out his words, tired of the cycles of apologies and mistakes. As I reflected silently, Brian suddenly became aggressive, his frustration boiling over as he raised his hand toward me. That was the last straw. "Enough is enough," Scott intervened swiftly,
his actions quick as he subdued Brian with a skilled twist of his arm, aided by my father-in-law. "I just lost my mind for a moment, Amy," Brian claimed remorsefully as he was escorted out by Scott and my father-in-law, while my mother-in-law comforted me. Watching Brian being led away, I felt a mix of relief and sadness, realizing how far he had fallen. As Scott and I discussed the incident, I remarked on his strength. "Oh yeah, he used to do combat sports. Wouldn't recommend that move on just anyone," Scott replied with a light smile, which sparked a flutter in my heart. My mother-in-law, noticing our exchange, chuckled. "With such good looks and strength, it's surprising he doesn't have a girlfriend," she teased. Scott bashfully looked away, a response I found incredibly endearing. From then on, I decided to remain in the safety and care of my in-laws' home, a place where I felt loved and supported as we all eagerly awaited the birth of my baby. "If you'd allow, I'd love to hold your baby," my mother-in-law said warmly. "Of course, anytime," I replied, smiling, touched by her kindness. In the safety of this family, I found solace and strength, ready to face the future, no matter what it might bring. Amy recounted her tumultuous journey, sharing how discovering the clandestine meetings between her now ex-husband Brian and a colleague had led to significant changes in her life. Once I reported it to the colleague's husband, he conducted a thorough investigation. With that evidence, my divorce process proceeded smoothly. Both of them were fired for misconduct during work hours and for misrepresenting personal outings as business expenses, she explained. "Thank you for all the help," Amy said to Scott, her voice filled with gratitude. "It's only natural to want to help someone you love," Scott replied, his cheeks flushing a deep red at his admission. "Wait, what?" Amy was taken aback and both blushed at the revelation. It turned out that Scott had harbored feelings for Amy for quite some time. "I always thought I should hide these feelings," Scott confessed. Amy was surprised. She had never imagined that Scott felt that way about her. "Honestly, I'm not ready to be in a relationship like that right now," Amy admitted, still reeling from the upheavals in her life. "I understand, but if you can wait a bit, I want to explore these feelings," Scott said, hopeful yet respectful of her space. Amy smiled, touched by his sincerity, and Scott's smile mirrored her warmth. "I'm going to do everything I can to make you see how much I care," Scott declared. "Okay, I'll be ready for that," Amy replied, open to the possibility of a future together. During dinner, which was delicious, Scott's parents overheard their conversation and couldn't help but tease. "Looks like Scott has a girlfriend now," his mother joked, to which Scott responded with a playful blush, eliciting laughter from his father.
Amy's life continued to evolve beautifully. "I gave birth to our lovely daughter right on time," Amy proudly shared. "She's so cute. Congratulations. She looks just like you, Amy," Scott's parents complimented. "I don't want to let her go," Scott said, embracing his role as a father enthusiastically. Years later, Amy fondly remembered, "I happily married Scott and our daughter calls him Daddy. Scott adores her." They speculated about their future, imagining their next child. "I think our next child will be a boy," Scott guessed. "Yeah, that would be cool if he's like me, but having a boy who looks like you would be awesome too," Scott added, looking forward to their growing family. "I'm pregnant with our second child now," Amy announced, her face alight with happiness. "Our daughter is thrilled about becoming a big sister. We're all thinking of names together. It seems like our daughter's suggestion might win," Amy laughed, sharing the light-hearted family moments. "I'm going to make sure Amy, our daughter, and the new baby are happy," Scott promised. "Don't forget about yourself in that promise," Amy said with a smile, emphasizing the importance of self-care even in their shared happiness. "We're planning to live happily ever after, all 7 of us together, having fun and getting along. That's our plan," Amy included, her voice brimming with hope and contentment. We can't wait to go out together as a family once the new baby arrives, she added, envisioning a future filled with love and togetherness.